Yeah, before we get you out of here, though, man, you are the professor, so I gotta ask you this. I'm a lover of books. We brought up several good books throughout this podcast, but what are some books? Just give me a couple. Give me like three books that changed your life or gave you some insight to lead you to be the person that you are today.
Well, it's funny, right? Because I'm looking around my book collection right now, but it's some books that it's not even about. It's some books that weren't even ours. You know, like the deliberate dumbing down of America. Like,
Okay.
and that's this. Let me see if I can pull it. Try to make sure I got the right one. There we go. The deliberate dumbing down of America.
Okay.
And this is written by a woman by the name of Charlotte Isabite. Now, this book talks about, how the system of education was deliberately, designed to create, a permanent working class. So when you filter through these books, you start to read and you start to dissect. They're talking classism, but I see the racism inside of it, and I see how this thing, when you combine it with what Dr. Carter G. Woodson was talking about, then you start to, add on the pieces. I'm a person that fills in the blanks and puts the pieces of the puzzle together. You know what I'm saying? So, that's one book in particular. I mean, you mentioned some of my favorite books.
Yeah, I know you can give me a ton of them. I was just saying, just give me like three ones that you may have heard of, may not have heard of. Off the top.
But there was a book that sort of turned me around a long time ago, and it was "Make Me Want to Holler" by Nathan McCall.
Okay.
So and Nathan McCall, basically talked about his transformation into blackness, into black consciousness, and he had dealt with several situations. He grew up in the D.C. area. And he talked about his breakthrough, and he became a journalist for the Washington Post. And he talked about how he had to go through the racism in order to get there. Now there's one, several. I mean, you can talk about the compensatory code book, is written by Elder Neely Fuller, which he was the Jegna. That's another term we brought up in the movie, Jegna. He was Jegna to Dr. Francis Cress Welsing.
Okay.
Understanding what racism, white supremacy was. So we got that book. There's another book though that many people probably don't recognize in this a book that was just called Kaffir Boy.
I'm familiar with it. I'm familiar. Yeah. I haven't read it yet, but I actually have it in my list. I already have the book. I purchased the book. It's on my list of books that I'm getting to. And I want to bring up, because you brought up Nathan McCall. I actually read that book years ago, but just for the listeners out there, anybody that follows me, I'm always talking about books. One of the things that I recognize also is going back and rereading books at different points in your life, and I think I'm going to go back and read that now and see how I take in the information. Now that I have more information, because that's what's interesting about it. Because I've read The Miseducation Negro so many times, and each time I read it, I'm at a different point in life, and I'm taking something different from the book. And there's several books like that. So just want to bring that up as you mentioned Nathan McCall, because I was like, damn, I'm gonna go back and read that again.
Yeah, that same thing happened with me. I've read the book 4 or 5 times. I've given it away 4 or 5 times. I rebought the book 4 or 5 times because it's just you learn something different every time. A different piece. And with Kaffir Boy, written by a brother named Mark Mathabane. He was a South African, and Kaffir is akin to the word to the N word here, and African was Afrikaans or whatever, and talking about their struggles in Africa. And the thing I think is interesting about reading that book and why I brought it up is because if you look at the gentrified cities and the gentrified situation we're dealing with now, the areas in America are starting to mimic the conditions of apartheid, South Africa, prior to, the removal of apartheid, where they had the color and caste system. And the closer you got to the metropolitan area, the business district, the inner circles of the city, the whiter it got. And you had to show your passes and you had to show ID to get from one place to another. And now we're starting to see that, they're redlining here, openly redlining to the point where if you are not supposed to be in certain areas, the cavalry will show up and now you got to show them your license and registration. they don't even ask you for your registration no more. They just ask you for your driver's license. It happened to me one time. So, so those are some of the books. I mean, like I said, and look,
and I know you're a professor, so anytime you ask a professor about books, they can go on. But I want
to say this part.
You answered my question because you gave a couple books that, like, I'm going to go back. Like the first book you showed, I've never read that. I've never even heard of that book, but I'm adding that to my list tonight. Because as our brother Kill says, read or die. Like, I'm all about that reading life. So that's exactly why I asked you that question. I knew you would bring up something that's not one of the more popular books. So,
oh yeah, well, the thing is, I have so many books that I've yet to read that I plan on reading.
Yeah,
and that's the one thing I want to say is I'm not a know-all. I don't have all the answers. One book that I read and I'm reading and I'm trying to get more of, and it's the Blueprint for Black Power by Amos Wilson.
Okay.
And, reading that book. I'm also currently reading, one of the books from, I'm reading a book called Warrior. You know what I'm saying? And right now, do I have one of those copies? I'm trying to think if I have a copy of it up here. But no, it's in my process. But
speaking of planned shrinkage and gentrification, a book that I want to bring up also is The Color of Law. So for those listening, read The Color of Law, and especially for my people out there in real estate, it will give you a different perspective. It talks about how our communities were basically made, and the laws that were used to put us in the conditions that some of our communities are. So that's a powerful book right there. Nothing happens by accident. Let's put it that way. And The Color of Law pretty much breaks that down. Goes into redlining. It goes into racism in the mortgage industry. It goes into a lot of things, but it gives you facts, data, and can't argue with a lot of that. So The Color of Law is another pretty good book.